I'm not going to talk like an auctioneer and go super fast, but today on the Pick Six podcast, I'm Sam McKewon, that's Evan Bland, and we're going fast. It'll be just the two of us. We're going to cover 10 topics in a half hour. It's going to go really quickly. There's been a lot of news over the last couple of weeks, but I think most people are pretty up to date on that news, and we don't want to necessarily rehash it or go deep into all the things that we've already talked about. But we will go over 10 topics really quickly. Evan came up with 5. I came up with 5. 2 of them will be about the Super Bowl. And then the other 8 will probably be Husker sports related. And we will zip right through it. Evan, how you doing?
Hey, doing well, man. It's Friday. It's Super Bowl's coming up. No complaints.
Yeah. So it's always the first week of February is always important and poignant to me. My daughter was born on February 4th. 2008, roughly 12 hours after the Giants ended the Patriots' undefeated season. And I'll never forget that day. Never forget that Super Bowl, and I'll never forget the day that my daughter was born. And so the Super Bowl is always intertwined with her. She is 13 years old today, or yesterday, I should say. So happy birthday to her. This is what this week always kind of means to me. So it's a busy week because girls have big birthdays. Our sponsor is Team Schwalbach. The Schwalbach Agency is a family-owned all-state insurance agency with 4 licensed insurance pros, saving thousands of Nebraska Husker fans of money. They sell homeowner, auto, life, and flood insurance across Nebraska, and they also insure all the big boy toys. Motorcycles, boats, RVs, off-road vehicles. If you've had your roof replaced in the last 5 years, give Daryl Schwalbach, Cal Schwalbach, Nancy Mostick, or Kyle Murdoch, the 2 Kyles, a call at 402-590-5200. They can help you save a bundle. Free no-obligation insurance reviews and quotes are going to make sure all the fellow Nebraska fans are properly protected. You can reach them at 402-590-5200 or 402-590-5200 or www.nebraskaallstate.com. Thank you to Team Schwalbach. Question number 1 goes to Evan Bland.
First question. We're on the 20. We're going up tempo here. Does Nebraska have a 4th scholarship quarterback on campus this fall?
I think so. Now, I'm going to be tricky with the question. I think they could put a 4th guy on scholarship. That could be a Matt Masker within the program, or they could add a 4th gentleman to it, either through the JUCO route or the transfer portal. And it wouldn't surprise me if they went any one of the 3. I think it's entirely possible that there's a JUCO guy out there who can fit what they want to do, who doesn't have too many aspirations to try to beat out Adrian Martinez. You?
I say no. I think they've had 3 scholarship guys the last 3 seasons under Frost. I think Smothers impresses them enough that they feel like they have a strong number 2. I think you look at their transfer history and not wanting to pursue quarterbacks over the last few off seasons, particularly for that first 2018 season. I think they use those scholarships elsewhere, and they end up feeling pretty good with the guys they have this spring.
Good one. My first topic, my first question, rapid fire. The 2021 recruiting class, and I know you have a question a little bit like this too, but who is your favorite sleeper in the 2021 recruiting class? We both think Thomas Fidone is the number 1 guy. Who is your favorite sleeper in the 2021 recruiting class, and which guy, other than Thomas Fidone, do you think will play right away?
Well, I'll answer the first one first. I think Gabe Ervin has a really good chance to play right away. I mean, he's a very talented running back out of Georgia. He comes in at a position that's unsettled. He's an early enrollee, so I think all the factors are there for him to make a move in the spring. As far as a sleeper, I think this class is full of sleepers, to be honest, but I'll throw out somebody who's been kind of a man of mystery. I'll put Jalen Weaver, the defensive line.
Yeah, no kidding.
He's a guy who has done really no interviews. He's massive, 6'8", I think well over 300 pounds, if I remember right. Didn't have a season in California. I mean, he really is mysterious in a number of different ways, but when you have that kind of physical frame and setup, I think that could lead to some big things. I think some of his academic history maybe allowed him to go under the radar a little bit and for Nebraska to swoop in, or maybe he wouldn't have otherwise. I think he's a guy in a couple of years you could know his name pretty well.
Yeah. So my sleeper, if you're just talking over the course of like however long, is the guy that I'm going to say is the person who I think can play right away, and that's Marcus Buford. I think Buford is a guy that can come in and is a year older than a lot of the kids he's coming in with because he went to a prep school. He's a sharp guy. He's smart, and I think that he's probably going to be a piece on special teams pretty quickly. And then I think there's a chance that he becomes, a potential piece at corner if anybody gets hurt. Right now, they've got Cam Taylor-Britt, Quentin Newsome, and I think Braxton Clark will be back and relatively healthy. And then you've got Taman Lynham. And then I think you're probably looking for somebody else there, whether it's Malik Williams coming in or it's Marcus Buford or somebody else. If there's one injury in that group, if anybody gets banged up, you're probably calling somebody up from the from the rookies. So I think Marcus Buford is a sleeper long term. I think he's going to be a good player here and probably a 4-year guy. I don't know if he'll start a ton or play a ton this year, but I think in subsequent years he's going to play quite a bit. But my other sleeper, since you took him in Gabe Ervin, how dare you do that? Very disappointed that you would do something like that. I really like what Mekhi Bayer brings to the table. I think he's sort of a Big Ten built linebacker. He's a bigger guy. He's probably north of 6'1", somewhere in the 6'2" range, and already about 215, 220. And I think that's pretty common for Big Ten linebackers in terms of size. Colin Miller was bigger than that, and Will Honus is about that size now, and Nick Henrich is taller than that. Reimer's a little smaller. Reimer's awful quick. Reimer has got a lot of speed. But I think long term you're going to want guys that kind of bulk up and fit the part. So that's mine. Go.
If Nebraska had one do-over game under Frost, which one would it be? They're 12-20 under him. A few of those swing games, man, if they go the other way, the outlook on year 4 could be a lot different. What's the one do-over game that you would take?
We can't pick the same game. That's the only rule I got here.
Yeah.
Boy, you could go a lot of ways, but I'll be really honest with you. I'd go with a do-over drive, and that would be the last drive against Iowa. I think if they turn that last drive into a field goal and they win that game, I think it changes so much about the Scott Frost era. I think they go to a bowl game, obviously. I suspect they win that bowl game, and I think it changes the narrative completely on where they're at right now. I know that would be only one game. I don't know that it would have gotten them on a run, but the last drive against Iowa, if they finish that thing the right way, and they win it, that first they've beaten Iowa. Second, they get to a bowl. Third, everybody's talking about that 2019 season and saying, hey, well, they got to a bowl, remember? So, that was a tough one.
I thought you might say that. That was also my number one. My number two would be Colorado from 2019.
Yeah.
The way that game slipped away, they had the big lead midway through, lost it in overtime. I think still under Frost, that was the game that the players were most pissed off that they lost, and the game that maybe had the biggest snowball effect or maybe hangover effect, whatever you want to call it, for the rest of the season. Another one of those games where if Nebraska just wins that game and nothing else changes, they go to a bowl, changes perception quite a bit there as well. And it just meant a lot more. It was another rivalry game like Iowa. I felt like that just kind of put a shadow over a lot of that 2019 season before they, figured a few things out late.
Bigger deal. Wando Robinson and Luke McCaffrey leaving the program, or Matt Lubick staying with the program?
I still think it's got to be the guys that left. Just if nothing else for the optics of it. I mean, again, the coaching staff has earmarked both of those guys as faces of the program, futures of the program. Wandale Robinson's departure was maybe a little bit less surprising as January wore on. McCaffrey, as we know, the coaches expected him back the weekend before classes started, and then he announces that he's leaving. And so, you can kind of debate how much those guys would have been used, potential benefits possibly of them moving on, although that's hard to say with a guy like Wandale Robinson, who's a strong contributor. But if nothing else, it's not a good look when two headliners from your 2019 class move on after 2 years. Two guys who, by the way, played quite a bit. This wasn't an issue of playing time, which you often see with guys in the transfer portal. I think that got a lot of notice from people, and that's something that other schools can use to negatively recruit against Nebraska. I think that hurt. That to me is a bigger deal.
Okay, so I'm going to agree in the sense that I think short term it is a bigger deal that those guys left because of the notoriety and the interest surrounding it. Certainly, our stories would indicate that. But let me say this: that I think Lubick staying, and this is something we should have asked Scott Frost yesterday about the value of him staying. I think that Lubick staying gets Nebraska out of having to try to answer a very difficult question for the third straight year, which is who your offensive coordinator is going to be. And I think the question would have been harder to answer, a little harder to answer this time than it was last time, because I think Lubick was sort of the slam dunk pick last time. And Matt's ego is such that I think he fits pretty snugly in that staff as opposed to being somebody who's Bob Diaco-esque. I think Lubick is a pretty modest man, and so I don't think he went in there thinking I'm here to save everybody and reshape the program the way Bob did. And so I think Lubick fits in that way. But the other thing is I think that Frost probably found something a little bit in the rhythm that he was starting to develop as a head coach during the games. And if he feels like he can trust Lubick to take over more and more of that play calling structure, with Frost getting an opportunity to veto when he feels it's important, and make the big decisions, I think that's going to make Nebraska's team better, and I think it's going to make Frost a more attuned head coach when it comes to special teams. Because if they're still going the analyst route, and it appears that they will, then Frost needs to be able to manage some of that on game day when the analyst isn't down there looking people in the eye. So short term, I think the players leaving is a big deal, but I think Lubick staying is going to be a gift that keeps on giving over the course of the next year. Go.
Will Omar Manning be a significant contributor in 2021?
It's a really hard question to answer, Evan. It's really one of the hardest questions to answer. I thought Scott was very thoughtful yesterday when he said that he does not want to put too much pressure on Manning. I think that's appropriate. You don't want a player to feel like, they've got to do X, Y, and Z just to please the fan base or to please the coaching staff. I think their hope is that over the course of the spring and then another fall camp, that he gets in 30 good practices. And after he's had 30 practices, you have a pretty darn good football player. But I think you walk before you run, and they want to see the 30 practices first. And I think Manning, the reports I've got is, that there were flashes last fall, but then, things kind of went in another direction. But I think it's important that Nebraska try to make sure that they can develop him as a person and as a player. I don't want to use the phrase get something out of him. I think they want to see this guy flourish. And in order for him to flourish, he's got to start practicing and being a part of it. I will say this. I think Nebraska's receiver room is Nebraska's coaches believe that Nebraska's receiver room will be better whether or not he is a major contributor or not. They feel good about that position. They do. They feel good about it. Fans may not feel good about it. They feel good about it. If you listen to the specificity with which Frost talks about it, you can tell that he feels a certain way about it. And I'm not sure they feel that way exactly about the running back room, but I know they feel that way about the wide receiver room based on the way they've talked about it.
Yeah, I think part of the mystery with him is, we just don't know, first of all, what his issue has been, how much of it's been physical, how much of it has been mental, the impact of the pandemic and just living life on campus away from home for him. I did think it was interesting, Scott Frost comments on him. It's tough because I think you can play devil's advocate to what you said, Sam, and say, if they brought him in here, why shy away from expectations? Like, if you're a big time guy, shouldn't you embrace those? Shouldn't you, kind of dive into that and want to be that guy who he was at the junior college level and who, that's why he came to Nebraska to make big plays. So it's really interesting just to see what a full regular off season would do for him, a good spring, a good fall. And if indeed the receiver room is as deep as coaches seem to believe it is, then he can be a part of that. He doesn't have to necessarily be the guy, but if he's one of the guys, I think he has the tools to still be a pretty significant contributor. So I feel like with a full off season and another year in Lincoln, I think he will be a significant contributor next year.
Good thoughts. Today is February 5th. Camp isn't going to start until late March. I'm not sure we're going to talk to Scott a lot before then. Not sure we have to. Like I think Frost has done a lot of media here in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and will need some time to develop his team and to build the culture there. But so here's the question. Between now and the start of camp, when we talk to the coaches again, late March, who's the guy that we're not talking about right now that they're going to bring up as somebody who's impressed them in workouts and somebody that they're looking forward to watching on the field? Who's somebody we're not talking about that they're going to bring up as like, yeah, this guy's pretty good?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because of the delineation between kind of where the offense and the defense is. So it seems like the defense is mostly set. And so if you're going to hear about a guy on that side of the ball, it's probably going to be in a backup or kind of rotational type of role. So I think it probably would have to be somebody on the offensive side. And maybe it's, maybe it's something as vanilla, so to speak, as on the line. Maybe Trent Hickson is a guy who makes a move at that interior spot that's opened up by Matt Farniok. I guess I would say it would be somebody on the line is going to make a move. Maybe they have a really strong winter conditioning session. They get stronger. Maybe it's a guy like Ezra Miller. Maybe it's a guy who's been there, like a Brock Bando or Matt Sichterman. But the fact is, it's a young offensive line. There is opportunity there. They have a lot of bodies in the room. And that's a position that's getting a lot stronger. So while right now it kind of looks like there's a group of guys, it seems to me like maybe after the first week of practice, as they get into this thing, there's going to be somebody or maybe a couple somebodies who emerge as top guys at that spot.
I'm going to pick 2 guys in the defensive secondary because I just feel like they're close. They have things fairly well set in the secondary, but at the same time, there's some young guys back there I think they like. One of them is Taman Lynham, who is somebody who had to gain weight when he got here. That was obvious. He was a skinny guy. And Nebraska recruited him knowing that he probably wasn't going to play a bunch last year. And I think so he arrived early. He was an early enrollee. And this will be a full winter conditioning. Now, remember, they had a full winter conditioning last year before the pandemic shut everything down. So they did all that last year. So they got through that part. They'll have another one again, which will be relatively normal, minus a few things with COVID. I think Taman Lynham is somebody that we're going to hear about from coaches, Fisher. And I think Noah Pulligates is somebody we're going to hear about. I think Pulligates, he's been here a couple of years now, and I think it's probably taken a little bit of time. I think this is a guy that has a lot of skill set. In the Big Ten, I think you've got to be a certain size, Evan, and I think you know this. You got to be a certain size. You have to be bulked up. I think Wando Robinson at Kentucky is going to experience some of the same things that he experienced in the Big Ten. In that, what happens in the Big Ten is when you get hit, and you get hit hard. And over the course of a game, you get worn down. And I think Wando experienced that the 2 years he was in this league. And I think Pulligates is somebody that probably just had to get a little bit bigger. It's not the Pac-12. It's the Big Ten. It's not even the NFL. I think the Big Ten is a bigger league in some ways than the NFL is. The NFL is very much a passing league. The quarterbacks and the receivers are so good that it just takes time. And so I think Lynham and Pulligates are coming along, and they didn't come to Nebraska maybe with the same physical composition that Cam Taylor-Britt did. Cam was a quarterback in high school, running back, and he was all kinds of things. And so he was a little bit more built. But those are the 2 guys I'm going to pick.
Good thoughts. Every class has its own personality. For Nebraska, there was that 2018 kind of changing of the guard class. There was that redshirt army in 2019. There was the 2020 group that was kind of headlined by Florida guys and junior college.
5 of them left.
They did, but that was what it was when it came.
It was. What
do you think is the defining trait of this 2021 class as it arrives in Lincoln?
Well, let me give you the numbers. The 500-mile radius, or what I define to be 500-mile radius, Nebraska got 9 commits. In the Big Ten footprint, which also includes the 500-mile radius, they got 10. They got 5 guys from Nebraska, 3 from Iowa, 1 from Michigan, 1 from South Dakota, and then the other Big Ten footprint kid was New Jersey and Bayer. So I think what I would say about this group is this was a year when, you know, Nebraska and Iowa high school football was pretty dang good, and Nebraska recruited really hard in those two states, and 40% of their recruiting class, 8 of 20, are from the states of Nebraska and Iowa. So I would say that the what do you want to call it? The identity of this particular recruiting class is those guys from Nebraska and Iowa. That's the identity of this class.
Yeah, I think Scott Frost has said it. It's a regional class. I think it's a meat and potatoes class where sometimes you can get caught up on some of the stars or the physical abilities of guys on the coasts, and Nebraska's been burned, as we know well, by the transfer portal from a lot of those players. Yeah. This is a group that just strikes me as I mean, they're just bought in, right? Like, these aren't guys who could take official visits or unofficial visits. These are guys who could drive up on their own, maybe who came a year ago and got some familiarity with the campus. But I just look at the profiles of these guys, and there are very few who I would see as flight risks, so to speak, guys who would leave after a year or two. They built up strong relationships with each other. There's kind of an organic component to their relationship that wasn't built through summer team barbecues or coming on official visits. Like, they just did stuff on their own because they had no choice in the matter with all the shutdowns. And so I guess I would say there's a stabilizing factor to this group, and maybe maybe it's a group like this that helps Nebraska kind of reevaluate where and who it recruits. So I think it's a meat and potatoes kind of stabilizing group.
My question: did COVID kill recruiting hype for just 1 year or for a really long time? Because this year, the hoopla and the whatever around college football recruiting was just nowhere near what it used to be. And here's the second part of this question: is the transfer portal going to kill recruiting hype and hoopla? In other words, is portal season going to surpass signing day as the most important marker in a football team's development?
Well, the portal season part, I mean, maybe, right? I mean, look at just how the timeline of it all shakes out. I mean, if you're a successful football program and you sign your guys in mid-December, that's just part of the week. And for the first time for Nebraska, we actually saw what that looked like, because the season got pushed back and Nebraska signed its class a few days before the Rutgers game. And so, you talk about the class, and then it's kind of back to the football. You squeeze in kind of your features and different things where you can. And then, as we saw in February for the second straight year, there's really almost no drama whatsoever. It's all been kind of a given. People are like, oh yeah, that happened. But the transfer portal is really interesting because it opens things up it kind of opens up the wild west of possibilities again there. Whereas with recruiting now, it's become so, the process has become so defined now where you can be like, okay, who's taking an official visit, who has Nebraska in their top 4 or whatever. With the transfer portal, you have no idea. I mean, these guys go in there, the schools contact them in a free agent sort of setting, and then they just kind of pop. So there's a lot more room for speculation. And I think that's fun for fans to just maybe not know who or when something might pop. I think transfer portal season absolutely could take that over. I don't think maybe coaches are crazy about that, but it's certainly possible. What was the first part of that question again?
I think you answered the question more interestingly with the transfer portal, which is probably better. I think COVID hurt everything this year.
Okay, yeah.
I think the hoop and the hoopla and the hype was turned down by the fact that kids didn't get to take official visits, and there weren't visitor galleries, and there weren't, this guy showed up at Clemson's campus, or this guy showed up on Nebraska's campus and he was committed to this other place, or a Nebraska commit decided to take a late visit to Alabama or whatever, Missouri or whatever. COVID kind of shot some of that stuff down and made things a little bit less interesting. But I think the point you make about the transfer portal is really good. Nebraska signed 20 high school prospects. Yeah. And any junior college prospect they would sign, we would also assign to recruiting. It wouldn't be portal. But let's just say, for argument's sake, they signed 20 guys, and then they add They've added 3 transfers, and they add 2 more transfers. 20% of Nebraska's scholarship distribution and acquisition was given to the transfer portal thing, i.e., in 2018, I think it was 5 of 30 or something, 4 of 30. And so, like, you can see how the transfer portal will continue to be a factor, especially if you feel like you can add players of the caliber of Samari Toure and Marquise Stepp. Those are 2 players that I think you would have. Nebraska fans probably don't appreciate as much as they could about their abilities. 1, 2. You're right about this stuff just popping up. I remember when Chris Kolarevich, or Kolarevich, I'm not exactly sure how to say his last name, committed. It was on a Friday night, and I think I was driving to go get Chipotle for my family, and I think it was the week that they didn't play Wisconsin, and I was like, "Are you a scholarship guy?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, there's a transfer portal." Like, you don't always know what's going to happen. That's right. It's just kind of out of the blue, and so Nebraska's they're gonna work behind the scenes on a quarterback or maybe another player, and then all of a sudden they're adding. And then you're going to see walk-on transfer portal kids added, like Ezra Miller was, or Oliver Martin. Oliver Martin might be in scholarship this year. You never know. So that is interesting. All right, you got one more, and I got one more.
One more. Hey, the Super Bowl's on Sunday. What's your prediction for how that game goes?
Well, the Chiefs beat the Bucs earlier in the season, and I think the Chiefs will beat the Bucs again. But a matchup that I would watch is, Tampa started to get more aggressive with its coverage of receivers, especially against Green Bay. They ran more man coverage, a lot of young guys in that back end, and they would trust a 4-man pass rush and try to get home and sack Aaron Rodgers while they were covering man-to-man on the back end, and that worked against Green Bay. They were able to slow down one of what I think to be the second best passing operation in the NFL, and now they'll play the first. And the biggest difference in my opinion, between Kansas City and Green Bay is not the quarterback. I think Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes are equally great. I think the one player that Kansas City has that's going to be hella tough to cover is Travis Kelce. Now Tyreek Hill is a joy to watch. He is. And there's nobody quite like Tyreek Hill in the NFL. His speed and the way that he runs his routes and all that. But Travis Kelce is a matchup nightmare. And it's something that Green Bay didn't exactly have. It's something a lot of teams don't have. How do you cover Travis Kelce? If you're running man-to-man coverage, it's going to be Travis Kelce against Levante David sometimes, or Travis Kelce against Devin White. And I just don't know if anybody can cover Travis Kelce one-on-one. I just don't know that that's the case. He's too good of a player. Kansas City has too good of an offense, and Mahomes can put it in too many good places. So I'll take the Kansas City Chiefs by 7 in what I think will be a pretty good game, but ultimately one that Kansas City controls.
Yeah, I also think the Chiefs will pull it out. I think it'll be a high-scoring game, honestly, maybe a 40-30, somewhere in that sort of range. But, I also think the matchup to watch is going to be Tampa Bay's defense and Kansas City's offense. As great as Mahomes is, there are some pretty star-studded guys on Tampa's side too. And like you mentioned, they really found their groove. They kind of found what worked for them more aggressively as the season went on. I mean, I can't disagree with anything you're talking about with Kelce being the kind of the key matchup there. But then, flip it over, and what kind of game does Tom Brady have? I mean, if he can keep up with Mahomes, I think maybe that's the part of this thing that it could go under the radar a little bit. He has that ability to turn this thing into a shootout, and Kansas City's defense probably isn't as good as Tampa Bay's. So, maybe there's a slight advantage there. I'm also expecting a good game, and maybe it could be one that just comes down to some kind of strange special teams play or turnover. So it should be a lot of fun.
Before my last question, I just want to underline how great of a job that Jason Light, Nebraska native, has done at Tampa, and to also underline how they've done it, because I think it's really important to look at roster composition these days when you're trying to figure this stuff out. And I think this Tampa team, is similar to your Broncos with Peyton Manning. Now, Manning at the end of his career had a broken wing and could barely throw it. And so there were some issues there. But Manning 2 years before that was kind of where Brady is now. And, here's how they did it. They have an elite quarterback whose reputation and leadership ability elevates everybody else on the team. And I think that's what Brady did for these guys. I think Brady brings them up to a new level just by being Tom Brady and being the kind of person he is, just like Peyton Manning did for the Broncos. They took advantage of having really good young players that they drafted who are cheap. Devin White is not that expensive. Some of their young defensive backs are not that expensive. That's how they're able, and those are the guys that make some plays. And then they're fortunate Levante David is on the final year of his 5-year contract. He's making $10 million a year, which isn't a ton. Then they went and they backfilled with some veteran dudes along the defensive line, Sue and Pierre Paul and Vita Vea, who's he's about 4 years in. But they've got some nice veteran pieces there who aren't too expensive. On the offensive side, their running backs are cheap. They picked up Ronald Jones. They picked up Leonard Fournette for a song. I mean, for virtually nothing. And what you get down to is that running backs in the NFL are interchangeable. You never should. I mean, Leonard Fournette was drafted, I think, 4th by the Jaguars. That blew up in the Jags' face, and Tampa got the guy for virtually nothing. You know, that's a great situation for them. And so they built it. Jason Light built a really, really good football program. I don't think they're as good as the Chiefs, and I don't think that's Jason Light's fault. But that's the template for how you do it. You find a guy, you find an old guy for quarterback, and you kind of build it that way. If you don't luck into the magical draft of Patrick Mahomes, and only the Chiefs did, they had the foresight to do so, but they did. You have to build it some other way. And I think Tampa, just like the Broncos 5 years ago or whenever that was, have shown how to do it. You get a really good defense, you pair it with an older, smart quarterback, and you leverage pieces where you can. Mm-hmm. And there you go. They have the best run defense in the NFL. People will not talk much about that. It's all about Brady. But Devin White and Levante David and Sue and Pierre Paul, that's why they're in the Super Bowl. And I think that is why they're there. It's not because of Tom. Tom's Brady, again, has elevated everything. It's not because of his on-field play, but what he did off the field to inform the team. Last question before I go to the men's basketball. Yeah, they're coming back, by the way. We'll talk about them next week. They've had a hard go. What's your go-to on Super Bowl for food? And you don't have to give me the whole menu, but like, this is a must. This will be on the menu.
Yeah, well, I think for me it'd be 2 wings. We just got an air fryer here recently, so we've liked wings anyway, my wife and I. But doing it in the air fryer has been a big step up.
They turned out pretty good.
They really do. They're crispy.
I was surprised. Crispy,
very good. So we'll be having wings, and then usually some kind of chips and dip. So maybe we'll go with the hot queso. Probably a little bit of guacamole out there, and so it's not like a meal, but you just kind of eat as you go. It's kind of a progressive sort of deal. So wings and chips for us. Yeah,
the air fryer is not bad. They do. I was surprised. They crisp it up pretty well. Now ours only fits 10 wings, so
yeah, you
got to put 2 batches of the air fryer in there. But anyway, okay, so wings will be for us. Now usually we have teriyaki wings. So they're usually a sort of sweet and spicy teriyaki sauce. We usually do that for the Super Bowl. Hot wings other times, teriyaki wings. But then we have Reuben dip. You ever had Reuben dip?
No, I've not.
So imagine a Reuben with cream cheese and a little bit of sour cream for tang, and then Swiss cheese, and then you cook that in a crock pot, and then you put that on little pieces of rye bread or rye toast. It's good. Reuben dip. And I used to make lettuce wraps, the kind that you would find at P.F. Chang's or anywhere. But I'm tired of making those. It's too much work. So nice. We'll have the Reuben dip. We'll have the wings. My kids, I'm sure, will have queso and chips. You're a nacho artist, as I recall.
I am, yeah.
You're a nacho man. You have an appreciation for the well-made nacho plate of nacho.
There's a certain way to do it. You can mix up your different kinds of cheeses. Your mozzarella, your Colby Jack, some sharp cheddar if you're feeling really frisky, and I like to layer it. So you have kind of the first layer tortilla chips. You put maybe one kind of cheese on that, and then you put another layer of chips with a different layer of cheese. And if it's a group setting, maybe even a third layer. And then you kind of it's all about the cheese distribution too. You can't just clump it on one area. You can't it's a failure if there's a chip without cheese on it. You have to distribute that out. And then you have to heat it just the right amount. So the shredded cheese melts, but it's not burned or overdone. So yeah, you can definitely screw up nachos. And there's a right way to do it. Yes, you're right.
I don't know if you've ever seen the show on Netflix, I Think You Should Leave, with Tim Robinson. But there is a skit in I Think You Should Leave about loaded nachos and how and whether or not one person should eat all the loaded nachos versus the ones that don't have anything on it. And you're the kind of person who would never allow any chip to not be loaded. That's what I appreciate about your nacho artistry.
Otherwise, it's just a tortilla chip. I mean, yeah.
That's right. That's the whole debate in that particular skit. It's on Netflix, so yes. Yeah, that's a good one to watch. All right. Hey everybody, we did it. We went fast for once. I didn't drone on and on for 45 minutes. So hey, have a great Super Bowl, everybody. We hope everybody's doing well out there. I'm sure you've had to dig out of snow about 17 times, but for Evan Bland, I'm Sam McKewon. Have a good weekend. This was the Pick Six Podcast. We'll be back next week.